Close your eyes and let yourself drift back through time, 2,000 years into the past, to the warm golden shores of ancient Alexandria, where the Mediterranean Sea meets the fertile delta of the Nile. Tonight, we're going to discover something remarkable, something that might surprise you. We're going to spend a day, a quiet, ordinary day, with one of history's most fascinating figures, Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh of Egypt. But forget everything you think you know about golden headdresses and dramatic romances. Tonight, you'll discover what this brilliant woman actually did from sunrise to sunset in her daily life. Let your breathing slow as we walk together through the marble corridors of the great palace, feeling the cool morning breeze carrying the scent of jasmine and papyrus from the palace gardens. If you're ready to rest, to learn, to drift peacefully into the past, then settle in and let's begin this gentle journey together. The Palace of Alexandria sleeps, but Cleopatra does not. It's still dark outside, perhaps 4 in the morning, and the future Queen of Egypt sits quietly in her private study surrounded by scrolls and the soft glow of oil lamps. This is her sacred time, her thinking time, when the palace is still and her mind is clear. She's not wearing elaborate makeup, no golden jewelry, no ceremonial robes, just a simple linen tunic, her dark hair loosely braided, falling over one shoulder. The room around her is filled with the gentle rustling of papyrus as she carefully unrolls another scroll. This one contains reports from the grain harbors, numbers and calculations about Egypt's wheat exports to Rome. You see, Cleopatra wasn't just a queen. She was Egypt's chief executive, her economist, her diplomat, her strategist, and every morning before the sun painted the eastern sky pink, she would spend these precious hours reading, calculating, planning. Her fingers, long and graceful, traced the hieroglyphic symbols, then switched to Greek text, then to Latin. She reads all 3 languages with equal fluency. Her education was remarkable, even by today's standards. The oil lamp flickers slightly, casting dancing shadows on the painted walls. The murals here in her private study don't show gods or battles. Instead, they depict the Nile during flood season, farmers in the fields, boats heavy with grain, reminding her always that her power rested on Egypt's prosperity. This morning, she's particularly focused on a problem that keeps her awake. Rome is demanding more grain, but the last flood season was lighter than usual. The harvest reports spread across her desk like fallen leaves tell a concerning story. She picks up a reed pen, dips it carefully in ink and begins to write. Her handwriting is confident, flowing, as she drafts instructions to the governors of Upper Egypt. They need to implement new irrigation techniques that she learned about from scholars in the Great Library. The palace around her begins to stir. She can hear the distant sounds of servants lighting fires in the kitchens, preparing for another day. But here in her sanctuary, time moves slowly, deliberately. Cleopatra sets down her pen and reaches for another scroll. This one sealed with the insignia of her spies in Rome. Yes, she had an extensive intelligence network. Knowledge was power, and power was survival. The report is written in code, a simple substitution cipher that she and her agents developed. It tells her that Octavian, the future Augustus Caesar, is gaining more influence in the Roman Senate. This is troubling news, but not unexpected. She makes notes in the margins, reminders to herself to strengthen certain alliances, to send gifts to specific Roman senators. Politics in the ancient world was a delicate dance, and Cleopatra was one of history's most skillful dancers. The eastern window begins to show the faintest hint of light. Dawn is still an hour away, but she knows her private time is drawing to a close. Soon her advisors will arrive, and her official day will begin. But for now, she allows herself just a few more minutes of peace. She stands, stretches slightly, and walks to the window. The palace gardens below are still shrouded in darkness, but she can smell the night-blooming jasmine and hear the gentle splash of fountain water. This is the Cleopatra that history rarely shows us, the thoughtful administrator, the careful planner, the woman who understood that ruling Egypt required not just charisma, but careful attention to detail. The first servants arrive as the sky begins to lighten. They move quietly, respectfully, through the outer chambers, preparing for their queen's morning routine. Cleopatra's personal attendant, a woman named Iras, enters the study with a soft whisper. "My queen." The sun approaches. Cleopatra nods, rolls up the scrolls carefully, and places them in a cedar chest. Her morning reading is complete. Now it's time for transformation, from private scholar to public queen. But even this transformation is not what you might imagine. There's no rushing, no dramatic unveiling. Instead, it's a careful, almost meditative process that takes nearly 2 hours. She walks slowly through corridors lined with polished granite to her private bathing chamber. This room is a marvel of engineering, fed by aqueducts that bring fresh water from the Nile, filtered through sand and scented with oils. The bath itself is carved from a single piece of rose-colored marble. Warm water steams gently, scented with rose petals and a touch of myrrh. She enters the water slowly, carefully, letting the warmth ease away the tension from her nighttime work. This isn't luxury for luxury's sake, it's preparation. In the ancient world, appearance was communication. Every choice, every detail sent a message about power, about divinity, about Egypt itself. While she bathes, Iris prepares the day's cosmetics. But here's what might surprise you. Cleopatra's famous beauty routine wasn't just about vanity. It was about chemistry, about medicine, about making statements that could be read across the ancient world. The kohl around her eyes, made from ground galena, didn't just make her eyes striking. It prevented infection. The lead-based mineral had antibacterial properties that protected against the eye diseases common in the Nile Delta. Her skin treatments included honey from her own apiaries, mixed with ground pearls and crocodile dung. Yes, crocodile dung. It sounds terrible to us, but it was rich in nutrients and had antiseptic qualities that kept her skin healthy and radiant. But perhaps most importantly, her scents. Each perfume was carefully chosen: jasmine to promote calm, rose for confidence, myrrh to suggest divine connection. These weren't random choices. They were psychological tools that worked on both herself and others. As she sits letting her attendants work, she continues to think, to plan. This morning she's expecting a delegation from Ethiopian traders. They want to expand their gold trade routes through Egypt. She must appear both approachable and commanding, wealthy but not wasteful, divine but not distant. It's a delicate balance that she spent years perfecting. Her hair, long and dark, is arranged not in the elaborate styles that later artists would imagine, but in a practical yet elegant arrangement, braided with thin gold threads that catch the light but don't interfere with her movement. If you're finding your own breathing slowing down, matching the rhythm of this ancient morning, that's perfectly fine. Just let yourself drift while we continue together. The process of dressing is equally thoughtful. Today's choice is a chiton of finest linen, dyed a deep blue, the color of the Nile at twilight. Over this, a light cloak embroidered with gold thread in patterns that represent the flooding river. Her jewelry is minimal but meaningful, a golden uraeus, the protective serpent worn on her forehead, earrings that depict the Ankh symbol of life, and her ring, the seal of Egyptian pharaohs that's been passed down for 300 years. By the time the sun clears the eastern horizon, sending golden light streaming through the palace windows, Cleopatra is ready to begin her public day. But she takes a moment, standing at her chamber window, to watch the sunrise paint the city of Alexandria in shades of gold and rose. This daily pause, this moment of stillness before the storm of royal duties, is something she never skips. It grounds her, reminds her why she fights so hard to protect Egypt and its people. The great audience hall of the Palace of Alexandria is already filled with morning light. The massive columns, carved from single pieces of red granite, cast long shadows across the polished floor. Cleopatra enters not with fanfare, but with quiet confidence. Her footsteps, soft on the marble, create a gentle rhythm that somehow commands attention without demanding it. The first petitioners are already waiting. A group of farmers from the Delta region, wearing their finest clothes, but clearly nervous in the presence of their queen. What happens next might surprise you. Instead of sitting on her golden throne, looking down at her subjects, Cleopatra approaches them directly. Her greeting is warm, in perfect Egyptian, not Greek. "Tell me," she says softly, "about this season's flooding. How are your fields, your families?" This is not ceremonial small talk. She genuinely wants to know, because she understands what many rulers throughout history have forgotten, that the strength of a kingdom lies not in its palaces, but in its people. The lead farmer, an elderly man with sun-weathered hands, begins to speak about the challenges of the recent growing season. His voice is shaky at first, but as Cleopatra listens, really listens, he gains confidence. She asks questions, specific questions, that show she understands farming, irrigation, the behavior of the Nile. This isn't just political theater. She has studied these subjects extensively. When he mentions a problem with salt contaminating the irrigation channels, she nods thoughtfully. "I believe," she says, "that the engineers in Memphis have developed a new filtering technique. I'll send instructions to your regional administrator." This is how Cleopatra actually spent most of her time, not in dramatic confrontations or romantic intrigues, but in careful attention to the practical needs of governing a complex nation. The next audience involves merchants from the spice routes. They're concerned about Roman taxation of goods passing through Egyptian ports. This is more delicate, touching on the balance between Egyptian independence and Roman demands. Cleopatra listens, asks for details about specific trade routes, specific costs. Then she consults with her treasurer, who has prepared detailed scrolls of trade calculations. "We can absorb some of these costs," she decides, "by adjusting fees on luxury goods while protecting essential items like grain and salt." She turns back to the merchants. "This will require careful record-keeping on your part. Are you willing to work with our new system?" They agree gratefully. They've dealt with rulers who made decisions based on whim or immediate profit. Cleopatra's approach, based on careful analysis and long-term thinking, inspires confidence. As the morning progresses, the audiences continue. Each petitioner receives her attention, her consideration, her genuine interest in their problems. A delegation of priests from Philae Temple needs approval for renovations. She questions them closely about the architectural details, the costs, the religious significance. Then she approves the project, but suggests modifications that will make it both more beautiful and more practical. Young scribes from the Great Library request funding for a new copying project. They want to preserve works by Aristotle that are deteriorating. She not only approves, but suggests additional texts that should be included. "Knowledge," she tells them, "is Egypt's greatest treasure, more valuable than gold, more lasting than monuments." A group of women from Alexandria's markets brings concerns about food prices, particularly the cost of bread. This touches the heart of political stability. Throughout history, bread prices have toppled governments. Cleopatra has prepared for this. Her morning reading included detailed reports about grain supplies, weather patterns, storage capacity. She can speak knowledgeably about every aspect of Egypt's food system. "The recent Roman demands," she explains, "have stressed our reserves, but I've arranged for additional grain from our southern provinces, and new storage facilities are being built in 3 cities. She provides specific details, Timeline for improvements, compensation for temporary hardships. This isn't empty promising. It's detailed planning based on real resources. By midday, when the sun reaches its highest point and the audience hall grows warm, Cleopatra has seen perhaps 50 petitioners, made dozens of decisions, approved expenditures, resolved disputes, planned projects. But most importantly, she has listened, really listened to the voices of her people. This daily practice of direct contact with her subjects kept her connected to the real needs of Egypt. It also provided her with information that no spy network could match. The genuine concerns, the unfiltered opinions, the ground-level view of how her policies actually worked. This was Cleopatra's true genius. Not her beauty, not her romances, but her understanding that successful leadership required constant attention to the details of people's daily lives. If you're still with me, feeling the gentle rhythm of these morning meetings, you might want to share this peaceful journey with someone else who struggles with sleep or simply enjoys learning while resting. As the sun reaches its peak and the palace grows warm, Cleopatra withdraws to her private council chamber. The morning audiences have given her a clear picture of Egypt's internal needs. Now it's time to address external challenges. The council chamber is smaller than the audience hall, more intimate, designed for serious conversation rather than ceremony. The walls are lined with maps, trade routes, Roman territories, allied kingdoms, visual reminders of Egypt's place in a complex world. Her advisors arrive one by one. These are not decorative courtiers, they're experts in their fields, chosen for knowledge rather than birth or wealth. First comes Apollodorus, her most trusted agent. Assyrian by birth but Egyptian by choice. His network of contacts stretches from Britain to India. If there's a rumor, a plot, a change in policy anywhere in the known world, Apollodorus knows about it. Today, he brings troubling news from Rome. Octavian is consolidating power faster than expected. Several senators who previously supported Egyptian independence have suddenly changed their positions. Bribes? Cleopatra asks, settling into her chair with practiced calm. Probably, Apollodorus replies, but also fear. Octavian has been very effective at eliminating his enemies. Next arrives Demetrius, her chief economist, a man who understands that in the ancient world, as in ours, economic power ultimately determines political power. He spreads scrolls across the polished table, charts and calculations that show Egypt's financial position. The picture is complex. Our grain exports, he reports, continue to provide substantial revenue, but Roman taxation is increasing, and they're demanding payment in gold, not goods. This is a deliberate strategy by Rome. Gold can be spent on Roman soldiers. Egyptian grain feeds Roman people, but doesn't directly strengthen Roman armies. Cleopatra studies the numbers carefully. Her mind, trained in mathematics since childhood, quickly grasps the implications. What if, she suggests, we reduce grain shipments to Rome while increasing trade with other partners? Dangerous, warns Metrodorus, her military advisor, a grizzled veteran who understands that economic warfare can quickly become actual warfare. Roman legions, he continues, could blockade Alexandria within weeks, cut off all trade, starve us into submission. This is the constant balancing act of Cleopatra's reign. Every decision must weigh Egypt's needs against Roman power, independence against survival. But here's what makes Cleopatra extraordinary. She doesn't just react to Roman pressure, she plans multiple moves ahead, like a master chess player. Apollodorus, she says, what's the situation in Gaul? He smiles slightly, understanding her thinking. Still restless, Caesar's conquests created stability, but also resentment. The tribes remember their independence. And in Germania, worse. The recent battles have made Rome seem vulnerable. Some tribal leaders are forming alliances. Now Cleopatra reveals her deeper strategy. For months, she's been quietly supporting potential Roman enemies. Not with armies, Egypt couldn't afford direct military confrontation, but with gold, with information, with diplomatic contacts. If Rome becomes distracted by rebellions on its frontiers, Egypt gains negotiating power. It's a dangerous game, but potentially very effective. We need to be careful, she warns her advisors. If Rome discovers our involvement in supporting their enemies, they'll invade Egypt, Metrodorus finishes grimly. Exactly, Cleopatra agrees. So we must be invisible. Our support must seem to come from others. This is where Cleopatra's legendary intelligence network becomes crucial. She has agents throughout the Mediterranean, merchants who report on Roman military movements, scholars who monitor political discussions, even slaves in Roman households who overhear important conversations. The afternoon discussion continues. Each advisor presents challenges, options, consequences. Cleopatra listens, asks questions, synthesizes information from multiple sources. A report from her agents in Athens suggests that certain Greek philosophers are becoming critical of Roman expansion. Could they be persuaded to write works that influence public opinion against imperialism? Intelligence from Alexandria's Jewish quarter indicates that Jews throughout the Roman Empire are increasingly unhappy with Roman religious policies. Could this dissatisfaction be channeled into useful political pressure? Trade information from her merchants in India suggests that demand for Roman goods is declining, while Egyptian products, particularly fine linen and cosmetics, remain popular. How can this trend be accelerated? Every piece of information is a potential tool in the great game of international politics. Cleopatra files it all away in her remarkable memory, to be used when the time is right. By mid-afternoon, when the sun begins to angle westward and the council chamber starts to cool, the basic strategy for the coming months has been decided. Egypt will continue to meet its obligations to Rome, but seek new trading partners in the east. Financial support for Rome's enemies will be increased, but channeled through third parties, and preparations will be made for various contingencies, including the possibility of military action. It's a complex plan, full of risks, but carefully calculated to give Egypt the best chance of maintaining its independence. This is the Cleopatra that history often overlooks, not the seductress of popular imagination, but the strategic thinker who understood that in a world of empires, survival required not just intelligence, but the courage to take calculated risks. As the afternoon light begins to soften and cast long shadows through the palace corridors, Cleopatra makes her way to her favorite destination, the Great Library of Alexandria. This is where she feels most herself. Not as queen, not as diplomat, not as political strategist, but as a seeker of knowledge, a scholar in her own right. The Great Library is one of the wonders of the ancient world. Its corridors stretch seemingly forever, lined with scrolls containing the accumulated wisdom of humanity. Works by Aristotle, Plato, Euclid, Archimedes, medical texts from Egypt, mathematical treatises from Babylon, poetry from Greece, philosophy from India, all gathered here in this temple to human learning. Cleopatra's footsteps echo softly on the marble floors as she makes her way to a particular section. Today, she's interested in recent works on hydraulic engineering. You see, the morning's conversation with the farmers has sparked an idea. What if the irrigation problems in the delta could be solved not with traditional methods, but with new technology? She finds the scroll she's looking for, a treatise by Ctesibius of Alexandria on water pumps and pressure systems. She unrolls it carefully and begins to read, her concentration complete. This is another side of Cleopatra that surprises people. She wasn't just a patron of learning, she was a serious scholar herself, capable of understanding complex technical concepts and applying them to practical problems. The head librarian, Demetrius the grammarian, approaches respectfully. He's grown accustomed to these afternoon visits, when his queen becomes simply another researcher among the scrolls. "Your Majesty," he says softly, "I've located the work you requested on Roman road construction. This isn't casual reading. Cleopatra is studying Roman engineering for strategic purposes. Understanding how Rome builds and maintains its infrastructure gives her insights into Roman strengths and vulnerabilities." She examines the scroll carefully. The Romans are remarkably systematic in their approach. Every road built to specific standards, every bridge designed for particular loads. It's impressive, but also predictable. "Demetrius," she asks, "do we have any works on sabotage or defensive strategies against superior forces?" The librarian understands immediately. There are several military treatises by Greek strategists who fought against Persian invasion, and some more recent works about guerrilla tactics. This is how Cleopatra prepares for every possibility, by studying not just current situation, but historical precedents. What worked, what failed, what principles remain constant across time. She settles into a comfortable reading chair and opens a work by Xenophon about retreat and survival. It's sobering reading, but necessary. As she reads, other scholars work quietly nearby. The great library is a place of peaceful concentration, where the pursuit of knowledge creates its own sacred atmosphere. A young scribe approaches hesitantly with a question about translation. He's working on converting a Babylonian mathematical text into Greek, but struggling with certain concepts. Cleopatra looks up from her reading and considers the problem. Mathematics is one of her strongest subjects. She's studied with the best teachers in Alexandria. The Babylonians, she explains patiently, use a base 60 system for certain calculations. What seems like an error might actually be a different way of expressing the same concept. She works through the problem with the young scribe, explaining the logic behind the Babylonian approach and how to accurately represent it in Greek notation. This is typical of Cleopatra's approach to learning. She doesn't just absorb information. She shares it, teaches it, helps others understand complex ideas. The afternoon continues with quiet study. She reads about Roman military tactics, Egyptian agricultural techniques, Greek philosophy, Persian diplomacy. Each subject adding to her comprehensive understanding of the world she must navigate. A messenger arrives with reports from her spies in Rome. She reads them carefully, making notes in the margins. But even urgent intelligence doesn't disrupt her scholarly rhythm. She's learned that panic leads to poor decisions, while careful analysis based on complete information usually leads to better outcomes. As the sun begins to sink toward the western horizon, casting golden light through the library's high windows, Cleopatra prepares to return to her royal duties. But she takes a moment to stand among the scrolls and appreciate this remarkable institution. The great library represents everything she's fighting to protect: the accumulated wisdom of civilization, the free exchange of ideas, the belief that knowledge belongs to all humanity. Rome, with its emphasis on conquest and control, sees knowledge as a tool for domination. Egypt, under Cleopatra's rule, sees knowledge as a treasure to be preserved and shared. This philosophical difference runs deeper than political disagreement. It represents two different visions of what human civilization could become. As evening approaches and the Mediterranean sun begins its descent toward the western horizon, Cleopatra returns to her private chambers to prepare for tonight's most important performance. But this isn't the kind of performance you might imagine. Tonight, she's hosting a diplomatic dinner for Ethiopian ambassadors, and the success of these negotiations could determine Egypt's access to gold, ivory, and exotic animals for years to come. Her attendants are waiting with selections of evening wear, each choice carefully considered for the messages it will send. The Ethiopians value displays of wealth, but also respect traditional Egyptian symbols. She chooses a gown of deep purple silk, the color of royalty, embroidered with gold thread in patterns that represent the flooding Nile and the rising sun. Over this, a collar of gold and carnelian in the traditional pharaonic style. But the real preparation happens in her mind. As her attendants arrange her hair and apply her evening cosmetics, Cleopatra reviews everything she knows about Ethiopian culture, politics, and current needs. The Ethiopian kingdom is wealthy but isolated. They need access to Mediterranean trade routes. Egypt can provide that access but needs Ethiopian gold to maintain independence from Rome. It's a natural partnership, but the details of trade agreements, tribute arrangements, and mutual defense must be negotiated with extreme care. The dining hall has been prepared with Ethiopian preferences in mind: incense burning with scents of frankincense and myrrh, familiar to the southern visitors, cushions arranged in their traditional semicircular pattern. The menu, too, has been carefully planned. Traditional Egyptian dishes, but prepared with spices from Ethiopian trade routes. A subtle reminder of existing connections and future possibilities. As Cleopatra makes her final preparations, she practices key phrases in the Ethiopian language. It's a small gesture, but one that shows respect for her guests' culture and her commitment to serious negotiation. Her interpreter will be present, but opening the evening with greetings in their own language sets a tone of mutual respect rather than Egyptian superiority. The sun sets, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold as the Ethiopian delegation arrives at the palace gates. They're an impressive group, tall, dignified men dressed in white robes with elaborate gold jewelry. Cleopatra greets them personally at the entrance to the dining hall. "Welcome," she says in carefully practiced Ethiopian. "May this evening bring friendship and prosperity to both our peoples." Their surprise and pleasure at hearing their own language is evident. The senior ambassador, a man named Caleb, responds warmly in accented but fluent Greek. "Your Majesty honors us with your greeting. We come with hopes for lasting friendship between the kingdoms of the Nile." The dinner proceeds with careful attention to diplomatic protocol. Each course is accompanied by gentle conversation about safe topics: Ethiopian music, Egyptian architecture, the beauty of the Nile at sunset. But underneath the pleasant conversation, serious business is being conducted. Through subtle questions and carefully phrased observations, both sides are learning about each other's real positions. Cleopatra mentions casually that Roman demands for tribute are increasing. The Ethiopians respond by noting that northern trade routes are becoming more dangerous. Both sides are establishing the pressures they face. The main course is roasted lamb, prepared with Ethiopian spices. As they eat, Cleopatra tells stories about ancient Egyptian-Ethiopian alliances, particularly during the reign of Pharaoh Taharqa, who himself was Ethiopian. "Our peoples," she says, "have always been natural allies. We share the great river, we share ancient wisdom, and we face similar challenges from northern empires." The Ethiopian ambassador nods thoughtfully. "Indeed, in my grandfather's time, Egyptian and Ethiopian merchants traveled freely between our lands. Perhaps it's time to restore those ancient connections." This is the moment Cleopatra has been carefully building toward, the formal opening of serious negotiations. But even now, the conversation remains indirect, clothed in historical references and hypothetical scenarios. If such connections were restored, she suggests, Egyptian ports could offer secure access to Mediterranean trade, while Ethiopian gold could help fund projects beneficial to both kingdoms. They discuss specific trade routes, quantities of goods, security arrangements, but all framed as historical possibilities rather than immediate commitments. The evening's entertainment features musicians playing both Egyptian and Ethiopian melodies, demonstrating the cultural connections that could support economic partnerships. As the night progresses and the conversations grow more relaxed, real agreements begin to take shape. Ethiopia will provide specified amounts of gold and ivory. Egypt will guarantee safe passage for Ethiopian merchants and provide military protection for trade caravans. It's a complex arrangement requiring careful coordination, but potentially beneficial to both parties. Most importantly, it reduces Egypt's dependence on Roman trade relationships. By the time the evening ends and the Ethiopian ambassadors retire to their guest quarters, the foundation for a significant alliance has been laid. Cleopatra returns to her chambers, tired but satisfied. Another day of careful diplomacy has moved Egypt one step closer to the independence she dreams of. You can drift off now, or leave a quiet thought in the comments about what surprised you most about Cleopatra's daily life. The palace has grown quiet. The last servants have completed their evening tasks. The oil lamps burn low, casting gentle shadows on the painted walls. Cleopatra sits in her private chamber, still wearing her evening gown, but having removed the heavy jewelry and elaborate ceremonial makeup. She looks almost ordinary in the soft lamplight, a tired woman at the end of a very long day. Before her, on a simple wooden table, lie the reports that require her personal attention: tax collections from Upper Egypt, military dispatches from the frontier, letters from agents in Rome. Each document requires decisions that could affect thousands of lives. She picks up her reed pen and begins to write responses, her handwriting neat and careful, even when she's exhausted. Years of training have made precision automatic. To the governor of Elephantine, she writes instructions about strengthening border defenses. Roman expansion southward continues to be a constant threat, and Egypt must be prepared for any eventuality. To her agent in Rome, she sends coded instructions about supporting certain senators who favor negotiated settlement over military conquest. Gold, carefully distributed, can sometimes accomplish what armies cannot. A personal letter from her daughter Caesarion, studying in Rhodes, receives her most careful attention. The boy is now 16 years old, intelligent and curious, but still unaware of the full weight of his heritage. She writes back with maternal warmth, but also subtle lessons about leadership, about responsibility, about the cost of power. Someday, if Egypt survives, he may need to carry the burden she now bears. The night air drifts through open windows, carrying scents of jasmine and the distant Mediterranean. It's peaceful, almost deceptively so. But Cleopatra knows that peace is always temporary for rulers of small kingdoms surrounded by larger powers. Every day brings new challenges, new threats, new decisions that could determine the fate of an entire civilization. She stands, walks to the window, and looks out over her kingdom. Alexandria spreads below, its buildings silver in moonlight. The great lighthouse, still burning, guides ships safely to harbor. This is what she's fighting for. Not personal glory, not romantic adventure, but this, the continuation of Egyptian civilization, the preservation of 3,000 years of accumulated wisdom, art, and learning. In the distance, she can see the great library, its scholars even now working by lamplight, copying precious texts, translating ancient wisdom into new languages, ensuring that human knowledge survives whatever political storms may come. She thinks about her ancestors, the Ptolemaic pharaohs who ruled Egypt for 3 centuries, each generation facing similar challenges, adapting to changing circumstances, but always preserving the essence of what made Egypt great. Some had been warriors, others diplomats, some scholars, others builders, but all had understood that Egypt's strength lay not in military might, but in its ability to absorb, adapt, and endure. The mathematics developed in Egyptian temples, the medicine practiced by Egyptian physicians, the engineering that built the pyramids and carved irrigation canals. All of this, was part of the treasure she fought to protect. A soft knock at the door interrupts her reverie. It's Iris, her personal attendant, carrying warm milk infused with honey and a touch of valerian to promote restful sleep. "My queen," Iris says softly, "you've had a long day. Perhaps it's time to rest." Cleopatra accepts the warm cup gratefully. The liquid is soothing after hours of concentration and careful conversation. "Iris," she says, "do you ever wonder what would happen to Egypt if Rome finally decides to annex us completely?" Her attendant, who has served the royal family for many years, considers the question carefully. "I think, my queen, that Egypt has survived many conquerors. The Persians came and went, the Greeks came and stayed, but became Egyptian. Perhaps if the Romans come, Egypt will change them more than they change Egypt." It's a comforting thought. Egypt has indeed shown remarkable resilience throughout history. Each new ruling class eventually adopts Egyptian customs, Egyptian gods, Egyptian ways of understanding the world. But Rome is different, more systematic, more determined to impose its own culture rather than adapting to local traditions. This makes the current situation more dangerous than previous conquests. Still, as Cleopatra prepares for sleep, she takes comfort in her attendant's wisdom. Egypt's true strength has always been its people, their knowledge, their traditions, their connection to the land and the river. These things cannot be conquered by armies. They can only be preserved or abandoned by choice. She changes into a simple sleeping gown and dismisses her attendants for the night. Finally alone, she allows herself a few moments of private vulnerability. The weight of responsibility sometimes feels overwhelming. Every decision affects thousands. Every mistake could lead to disaster. Every success simply brings new challenges. But this is the life she was born to, the life she has chosen to embrace fully. Even with all its burdens, she cannot imagine living any other way. Tomorrow will bring new audiences, new negotiations, new problems to solve. But tonight, for a few precious hours, she can rest and let her mind drift peacefully, knowing that for now, Egypt endures. The palace has settled into the deep silence of the night watch. Only the guards remain awake, walking their careful rounds through marble corridors now empty and peaceful. In her private chamber, Cleopatra sleeps, but not entirely peacefully. Her dreams are filled with visions of Egypt's past and future, mixing memory with prophecy in the strange way that dreams do. She sees herself as a child, learning to read hieroglyphics in the Temple of Ptah. Her tutor, an elderly priest, points to ancient symbols carved in stone. "These words," he says, "have endured for 2,000 years. Will your words last as long?" The dream shifts, and she's standing on the deck of a royal barge, floating down the Nile during flood season. The water is chocolate brown, rich with silt that will nourish Egypt's fields for another year. Farmers working in flooded fields look up and wave. Their faces are peaceful, contented. This is Egypt as it should be, prosperous, peaceful, secure. But then the dream changes. Roman soldiers march along the riverbank, their armor gleaming in harsh sunlight, their faces cold and determined. They carry not seeds, but swords. She tries to call out, to warn the farmers, but her voice makes no sound. The soldiers continue marching toward Alexandria, toward the palace, toward the library. In her dream, she runs through endless corridors, trying to reach the great library, to save the scrolls, the accumulated wisdom of ages. But the corridors keep changing, becoming longer, more complex. Finally, she reaches the library, but finds it empty. The scrolls have vanished, the shelves stand bare. Even the familiar smell of papyrus and ink has disappeared. She wakes with a start, her heart racing. For a moment she's disoriented, unsure what's real, what's dream. Then the familiar sounds of the palace at night reassure her. The soft splash of fountain water in the courtyards, The distant call of night birds in the gardens, the gentle whisper of wind through palm fronds. She rises, walks to the window, and looks out over her kingdom. The great library is still there, its walls solid and reassuring in the moonlight. The lighthouse still burns, guiding ships safely home. But the dream lingers with the power that prophetic dreams sometimes have. Is she seeing Egypt's future, or simply her own fears made manifest in sleep? She has always believed in the power of dreams. Ancient Egyptians understood that sleep opens doorways between the world of the living and realms of deeper wisdom. Perhaps this dream is a warning to prepare more carefully for the coming Roman threat. Perhaps it's a reminder that some treasures are too precious to risk in political gambles, or perhaps it simply reflects the enormous pressure she feels as the last Ptolemaic ruler, the last pharaoh who might be able to preserve Egypt's independence. She returns to her bed, but doesn't immediately try to sleep. Instead, she lies quietly, listening to the night sounds, letting her mind drift peacefully over happier memories. Her coronation day, when she was 18 years old. The pride she felt receiving the ancient symbols of pharaonic power, the double crown, the crook and flail, the responsibility and honor of 3 millennia of Egyptian rulership. The first time she successfully negotiated a trade agreement with Nubian merchants, the satisfaction of solving a complex problem through patience and careful diplomacy. The day her son Caesarion first read an entire scroll by himself, his face bright with accomplishment and the joy of discovery. These memories are like gentle waves washing away the anxiety of the nightmare, reminding her that her life has contained much happiness, many small victories, countless moments of simple human satisfaction. As sleep gradually returns, Cleopatra's breathing becomes deeper, more regular. Her dreams now are peaceful, filled with images of successful harvest festivals, diplomatic triumphs, and the laughter of children playing in palace gardens. These are the dreams that sustain her through all the political pressures and endless responsibilities, the vision of Egypt thriving, growing, contributing its gifts to human civilization. The stars that shone on ancient Memphis and Thebes continue their eternal dance across the sky, the same constellations that guided the pyramid builders and the scribes who first wrote down human laws. Time moves in vast cycles, and individual lives, even royal ones, are brief moments in the great story. But each life matters. Each choice shapes the future. Each act of courage or wisdom adds to humanity's slow progress towards something better. In her peaceful sleep, Cleopatra becomes part of that eternal rhythm. Her breathing matches the gentle pulse of the Nile. Her dreams flow like the river itself toward the sea of all possibility. In the deep pre-dawn darkness, when the palace rests most peacefully, Cleopatra wakes naturally, without servants or duties calling her to consciousness. This is her most private hour, when she belongs entirely to herself. No queen, no diplomat, no strategist, just a woman alone with her thoughts and the vast Egyptian night. She moves quietly to her private balcony. The stone is cool beneath her bare feet. The air carries the scent of night-blooming flowers and the distant salt of the Mediterranean. Above her, the stars shine with the clarity possible only in ancient skies, unpolluted by the lights of modern civilization. The constellations that guided Egyptian farmers and sailors for thousands of years. She identifies each familiar pattern. Orion, which the Egyptians called Osiris. Sirius, the star that heralded the Nile's annual flood. The circumpolar stars that never set, symbols of eternal endurance. These stars witnessed the rise of Egyptian civilization. They shone on the builders of the pyramids, on the priests who developed hieroglyphic writing, on the mathematicians who calculated the length of the year. They will continue shining long after her own struggles are forgotten. This perspective both humbles and comforts her. In the context of cosmic time, even the mighty Roman Empire is temporary. Egypt, too, will eventually change, evolve, perhaps even disappear. But the human quest for knowledge, beauty, and meaning continues. She has been part of that quest. Whatever happens to her personally, or to Egypt politically, she has contributed to humanity's slow progress toward wisdom. The Great Library contains works that she commissioned: mathematical treatises, historical chronicles, scientific observations. These will survive even if her kingdom does not. The irrigation projects she approved will continue feeding Egyptian families for generations. The diplomatic relationships she built will influence Mediterranean politics long after her death. The example she set of female leadership, intellectual curiosity, and cultural preservation will inspire future rulers, both men and women, to see broader possibilities. A gentle breeze stirs the curtains behind her. Soon the eastern sky will begin to lighten. Her private time will end. The demands of queenship will resume. But for now she stands in perfect solitude, connected to the eternal rhythms of night and dawn, river and sea, earth and star. This is perhaps the real secret of her strength. Not her political intelligence or diplomatic skill, but her ability to find moments of peace within the storm of responsibility. She has done her best with the circumstances she inherited: the Roman expansion, the internal pressures within Egypt, the economic challenges of maintaining independence. None of these were her creation. All were her responsibility. History will judge whether her strategies were wise, whether her alliances were well chosen, whether her sacrifices achieved their intended goals. But standing here in the star-filled darkness, she knows that she has lived fully, loved deeply, thought carefully, and fought courageously for what she believed in. The eastern horizon begins to show the faintest hint of grey. Dawn approaches. Another day of challenges, decisions, and careful navigation through the complexities of ancient politics. She takes one last moment to breathe deeply the cool night air, to feel the solid stone beneath her feet, to appreciate the simple fact of being alive in this remarkable moment of history. Then she returns to her chamber to prepare for whatever this new day will bring, ready to once again transform from private woman to public queen, from individual dreamer to guardian of civilization. The first pale light of dawn begins to filter through the palace windows, painting the marble corridors in soft shades of rose and gold. Cleopatra returns to her study just as she has every morning for the past 18 years. The same scrolls await her attention, new reports from governors, traders, spies, and scholars. But this morning feels different. Perhaps it's the lingering influence of her dream, or the peaceful hour spent under the stars. She approaches her duties with a sense of calm acceptance. The problems remain the same. Roman pressure continues to increase. Egypt's resources are stretched. The balance between independence and survival grows more delicate each day. But she has faced these challenges before. She has developed strategies, built alliances, created contingency plans. Whatever comes, she is as prepared as any mortal ruler can be. As she begins her morning reading, servants quietly prepare the palace for another day. In the kitchens, bread is baking. In the gardens, flowers are opening to greet the sun. In the great library, scholars are already at work. This is the true continuity of civilization, not in the grand gestures of rulers, but in the daily activities of ordinary people pursuing their crafts, their studies, their quiet contributions to human knowledge and beauty. A messenger arrives with news from Rome. Octavian has been declared Augustus by the Senate. The Roman Republic is officially dead. The empire has begun. This is momentous news, but not unexpected. Cleopatra makes careful notes, considers the implications, begins planning her response. The game has changed, but it continues. Another scroll brings better news. The Ethiopian ambassadors have accepted her proposed trade agreement. Gold and ivory will soon flow toward Alexandria, providing Egypt with new resources for independence. The irrigation project in the Delta has been approved by local governors. Egyptian farmers will have better access to fresh water. Crop yields should improve next season. A young scribe from the Great Library requests permission to establish a new copying center in Memphis. The preservation of knowledge continues to expand. Each report, each decision, each small success adds to the complex tapestry of her reign. Some threads are bright, others dark, but together they create a pattern that has meaning and beauty. As the sun rises higher and the morning light grows stronger, Cleopatra prepares for another day of audiences, councils, negotiations, and careful decision-making. But she carries with her the peace of the pre-dawn hour, the perspective of the eternal stars, the knowledge that she is part of something much larger than herself. Whether Egypt maintains its independence or eventually becomes part of the Roman Empire, whether her name is remembered with admiration or forgotten entirely, she has lived with honor, dignity, and genuine care for the people she serves. This is what Cleopatra actually did all day. Not the dramatic seductions of popular imagination, but the careful, thoughtful work of governing a complex nation in dangerous times. She read reports and analyzed problems. She listened to petitioners and sought solutions. She negotiated with foreign ambassadors and planned for uncertain futures. She studied in the Great Library and contributed to human knowledge. She worried about her people's welfare and fought to preserve their culture. Most of all, she carried the enormous weight of responsibility with grace, intelligence, and an unshakable commitment to Egypt's survival. The sun has completed its journey across the Egyptian sky, and our day with Cleopatra has come to its gentle end. We've seen her not as legend portrays her, but as she actually was, a brilliant administrator, a careful scholar, a thoughtful diplomat, and a woman carrying the hopes of an entire civilization. Her days were filled not with romance and intrigue, but with the patient, detailed work of leadership. Reading reports, listening to problems, making difficult decisions, always balancing Egypt's needs against the reality of Roman power. She was perhaps the most educated ruler of her time, fluent in 9 languages, knowledgeable about mathematics, medicine, engineering, and philosophy. She used this learning not for personal glory, but in service of her people. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, you might carry with you her example of quiet competence, thoughtful preparation, and graceful acceptance of responsibility. Like the gentle rhythm of the Nile flowing toward the sea, like the eternal cycle of Egyptian seasons, like the patient work of scholars preserving ancient wisdom, her life reminds us that the most important achievements often happen quietly, steadily, without dramatic fanfare. If this brought you peace, if you found rest in these ancient rhythms, perhaps you'll subscribe and join us for more gentle journeys through history's quieter moments. Or maybe share this story with someone else who needs a little rest, a little escape into the peaceful complexities of the distant past. The stars that shone on Cleopatra's Alexandria still shine tonight. The same constellations that guided ancient Egyptian sailors can guide you gently into dreams. Rest well in the knowledge that human wisdom, human kindness, and human dedication to something greater than ourselves continue through all the changes of history. Sleep peacefully under those eternal stars, and perhaps dream of floating gently down the ancient Nile toward tomorrow's quiet adventures, until we meet again in another time, another place, another gentle story from history's peaceful hours. Sweet dreams.